Good evening and welcome to Thoughts Too Big for My Head Season 6, Episode 324, Day 2122. Fellow challengers and challenge nation, tonight's episode is diplomacy. Let's define diplomacy before we get too far afield. I've only got a few minutes and I really want to hit this issue hard. As many of you may know, I was a political science major in college and I worked on Capitol Hill for a number of years. Diplomacy is what we saw every day. So, the definition of diplomacy is the profession, activity, or skill of managing international relationships, typically by a country's representatives abroad. The next definition is the art of dealing with people in a sensitive and effective way. Today, we are having an idea of how our foreign policy is going to be managed going forward. Let's review the facts before I jump into my opinions and my feels. We have had a struggle about the belief of how much money is actually going toward foreign aid. So let's review some of that because that's going to play into what happens next. According to the Pew Research organization, the U.S. government was currently on track to spend about $58.4 billion on international assistance programs in the fiscal 2025 year. But we're only in for the first couple of months into the fiscal year, and the Trump administration is moving aggressively to cut that down. What that also means is, well, let's jump into this a little bit deeper. There are two kinds of power that are displayed. There is soft power, which is where most of that diplomacy, that most of that foreign aid goes. Grain programs, grain programs, inoculation projects, things like that. Soft ways that we maintain influence in a region. That's soft power. Hard power is not only the rhetoric, but the willingness to back things up. Drone strikes, troops on the ground, firing missiles from or a military presence in the area. That's hard power. It's really, really interesting to see where the money is going. If we make this a budgetary concern, that 58.4 billion dollars is a small portion of our budget. But we reap greater benefits from that spending both here and abroad, especially if we're talking about purchasing grain. That grain has to come from somewhere, U.S. farmers, and then it goes overseas. That ability to influence people by our actions and benevolence does make a difference. Yes. Do people fight back? Yes. Do people use tough words and bellicose rhetoric? Yes. Bellicose, use it, word of the day. They use harsh rhetoric and being critical against us. That doesn't mean that we need to stop that foreign aid. Because for every one person that is being spoken, that is outspoken, there are many others who are favorably inclined to think about us as well, as a country, as a culture. If we remove soft power off the table, then everything becomes a hammer. And I think it was Einstein said that if all of your problems look like nails, or if the only tool that you are carrying is a hammer, then all of your problems look like nails. Foreign policy and diplomacy is a toolbox. And if we remove tools from the toolbox, then we will be using whatever is left as our primary diplomatic means. This is problematic because not only are we able to alienate allies, but we are also willing to alienate folks that are borderline, and we are reducing the amount of influence that we have on a global scale other than the big guys with all the guns. Rest assured that there are other forces in the world who will fill in those places. Nature abhors a vacuum, and what that also means is not only does it abhor a vacuum, it means that every place that we retreat with soft power, someone else will come in with the influence and interest to take our place, which means we have less influence on a global scale. Today we saw what one version of diplomacy may look like. I would ask you to think back to other presidential administrations, both Republican and Democrat, and see if this was emblematic of history, or was it something different? Remember, this is what diplomacy means. The profession, activity, or skill of managing international relations, typically by a country's representative abroad. And the second, the art of dealing with people in a sensitive and effective way. Check your history. Hold it up to what is currently happening, and then after that, make your choice as to what sort of diplomacy that you want to see in the future. This is a many faceted thing, and I'm fairly certain we'll be talking about it as it goes and progresses into the future. That's it for Season 6. Episode 324, day 2122 of Thoughts Too Big for My Head. Life is rich, especially when we are talking global diplomacy. Fellow challengers and Challenge Nation, make something happen. Leave me a comment if you cared to. I appreciate your feedback, and as always, rest easy and may your burdens be light. Good night.